Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to explore a really powerful idea from Tim Harford's book, The Data Detective. Think of it as a guide for how to think more clearly about all the numbers and claims that are flying around us every single day.
So let's kick things off with a pretty strange question, one you probably think you already know the answer to. Do storks deliver babies? Of course they don't, right? I mean, that's just an old folktale.
Well, hold on. Statistically speaking, yeah, they do. It's kind of shocking, but if you actually look at the data from all across Europe, the countries that have more storks also have more babies. The correlation is, no joke, incredibly strong. Now, obviously, it's not because the storks are actually, delivering the babies. It's just that larger places have more room for both storks to nest and for families to grow. But it perfectly shows how numbers can be totally true and at the same time super misleading. And that gets right to the heart of a big debate. What are statistics for anyway?
So back in 1954, you basically had these two totally opposite ideas about what statistics even are. On one side, you had Darrell Huff. His book, How to Lie with Statistics, was a massive bestseller, and it basically taught that numbers are just a magician's trick, a tool for swindlers. But on the other side, you had these two doctors, Richard Dahl and Bradford Hill, who saw statistics as something else entirely, a powerful telescope, a tool to see a hidden, deadly truth.
And what that telescope showed them was just incredible. Dahl and Hill's careful, methodical work cut right through all the noise and the corporate spin. They proved that smoking didn't just cause lung cancer. It was also linked to heart attacks. Their data was so powerful, so convincing that doctors themselves, the people who really understood the evidence, started quitting smoking in massive numbers. This wasn't some stuffy academic exercise. This work has saved millions of lives.
So, if stats can be this amazing tool for finding the truth, why do we feel so lost so often? Why do we get it wrong? Because it turns out the problem usually isn't the numbers themselves. The problem is us. It's our own minds that trip us up. To really get why, let's take a little detour, away from data and into the world of art and expertise. Meet Abraham Bredius. Back in the 1930s, this guy was the global authority on the Dutch master painter Vermeer. If anyone knew Vermeer, it was him.
So in 1937, Bredius gets shown this newly discovered painting, and he's just blown away. He apparently got super emotional and declared it wasn't just a real Vermeer, it was the artist's greatest masterpiece.
But hang on a second. Did you catch that? Quite different from all his other paintings, and yet every inch of a Vermeer. I mean, isn't that a huge contradiction? Shouldn't that be a massive red flag? If it was so different, how could he be so sure? Well, yep, you guessed it, the painting was a total fake. A brilliant one, but a fake. The world's top expert got completely fooled. Not because he wasn't smart, but because he desperately wanted it to be real. It fit a theory he'd had for years, and this is the real reason we get fooled.
It all comes down to this tricky little feature of our brains called motivated reasoning. It's our unconscious reflex to protect what we already believe. When we see a claim that we like, our brain immediately asks, "Can I believe this?" and starts looking for any reason, any excuse to say yes. But when we see a claim we don't like, our brain asks, "Must I believe this?" and looks for any reason at all to say no. And look, this happens to every single one of us, not just art experts trying to find a long-lost masterpiece. So what do? How do we fight our own brains on this? We need a toolkit. We need a few mental habits to help us see things a little more clearly.
The good news is you don't have to go get a PhD in statistics. The solution is just to build a few simple but really powerful habits. Here are 3 questions you can start asking right away to become a data detective.
First up, and this one sounds so basic, but we almost never do it. Stop and ask what's actually being measured. What do these numbers even mean? What's the definition?
So, for instance, you might see a big, scary number like this one, 39,773 gun deaths. And because of how the news covers it, your mind probably jumps straight to violent crime or mass shootings. But when we actually stop and ask what's in that number, a very different picture pops up. About 60% of those deaths are suicides. Now, that doesn't make the number any less tragic, of course, but it completely reframes the problem and how we might think about solutions.
Okay, next up, context. A number all by itself is basically useless. It's like a single word floating in space. You have to look at the bigger picture, at the trends over time. You might see some alarming headlines saying that for 1 month, London actually had more murders than New York City. That sounds pretty bad. But if you zoom out, look at the context. Back in 1990, New York had 12 times as many murders as London. So the real story isn't about one scary month, it's about the incredible long-term drop in New York's murder rate.
And finally, this one is a big one. Sometimes the most important data, the most crucial clue, is the data you can't see.
This brings us to this classic, amazing story from World War II. The US military wanted to make its bombers tougher, so they looked at the planes that made it back from their missions and saw where all the bullet holes were, mostly on the wings and the main body. The obvious solution, right? Add more armor where the planes are getting hit. But a mathematician named Abraham Wald had this incredible insight. He realized the most important data wasn't there. They were only looking at the planes that survived. The planes that got shot down were missing. And where were the bullet holes not on the returning planes? The engines. A hit there was fatal. So the armor needed to go where the bullet holes weren't. What this story really shows us is something huge. The antidote to being fooled by data isn't about becoming a math whiz. It's about adopting one simple core mindset.
And that rule, the one golden rule that ties all of this together, is simply to be curious. There's some fascinating research from a Yale professor named Dan Kahan that backs this up. He found that on really charged topics, being smarter or more educated doesn't actually help us avoid bias. In fact, it can just make us better at twisting the facts to fit what we already think. But there was one trait that broke the pattern: curiosity. People who are genuinely curious, no matter their politics, are more willing to engage with information that challenges them. They don't see it as a threat, they see it as an interesting puzzle to solve.
So where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway? Don't just throw your hands up and be cynical. Instead, get curious, ask questions. Notice your own emotional reactions, check the definitions, demand context, and always ask what might be missing. Because when you stop seeing statistics as a magician's trick, you can start using them as your own personal telescope, a tool to see the world and yourself just a little more clearly.